I am really excited this morning to welcome all of you to this wonderful conference. We've been planning this for several months, and it's so exciting to see all of you here gathered together. So thank you very much for traveling from long distances to be here at BYU Hawaii, and we look forward to hearing from each of you over the next 2 days. I'll introduce myself. I'm Hannah Smith. I'm the newest Associate Director at the International Center for Law and Religion Studies at BYU in Provo, Utah, and I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm going to start with introducing our panelists, and then I'm going to turn the time over to them to give their remarks for about 15 to 20 minutes each, and then at the end we'll do some moderated discussion and questions from the audience. So if you do think of a question, please feel free to save it for the end. I'm very pleased to introduce Reverend James Bhagwan, who is serving in his second term as the General Secretary of the Pacific Conference of Churches, which consists of 35 member churches and 11 national councils of churches from 20 Pacific Island countries and territories. He's an ordained minister of the Methodist Church, and he was born and raised in Fiji. Next, we have Reverend Dr. Peter Chong, who is the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Church in Suva, Fiji. He's been a priest for 32 years, and he did his postgraduate studies at the Jesuit School of Theology, earning his doctorate in sacred theology, focusing his dissertation on Fijian contextual theology. Next, we have Elder Taniela Wakolo, who is a General Authority 70 and counselor in the Pacific Area Presidency for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He studied management and public administration at the University of South Pacific and received his master's degree in management from the University of Sunshine Coast in Australia. He was also born in Fiji, and he and his wife have 2 children. And then finally, Father Francis Hezel, who is a Jesuit priest who has worked in Micronesia for over 50 years. He is the director of the Micronesian Seminar, which is an institute involved in community education across the Pacific, and he has published over 100 articles, 11 books, and 70 video documentaries on Micronesian history and culture. So welcome to all of you. Very distinguished panel this morning. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to turn the time over to Reverend Bhagwan to start us off this morning. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and Nisambula and aloha to all of you. As is our Pacific tradition, I acknowledge the indigenous and traditional custodians of the place in which we are gathered here in Lāʻie, and recognize their ancestors and their future descendants as part of the land, the sea, and the sky to which we all are part of. It's a deep honor to be here in this conference, and maybe no pressure being on the first panel for the day, but also to be with such distinguished colleagues from Fiji and Micronesia. Father Francis, I'll just say that you are one of my heroes, so I'll hope to catch up with you later on. My son is Francisco Xavier, so there we go. Let me begin by acknowledging also that the deep spirituality permeates the communities of Oceania and is at the heart of the Pacific people's relationship with each other and with the world. Spirituality is integral to the way in which we interpret, understand, and interact with one another and with the natural world. And this spirituality is enhanced by the many faith traditions of this world, which have grown roots in our diverse Pacific communities. These faith traditions are shared with 85% of those who share this planet. The language of spirituality, the expression in metaphor, in image, in silence, in hymns of praise and cries for justice, in reflection and meditation, in ethical action, in confession and repentance, and in justice and compassion is part of our way of life. That spirituality is not only experienced through faith communities, but also through indigenous culture. That deep sense of vanua or whenua, of rootedness, of not only rootedness to land, but rooted in respect and celebration of just relationships with all creation. And I speak today first and foremost as a Christian, a believer and follower in the way of Jesus the Christ. Before any cultural or denominational teaching, my earliest reference to human dignity has been the gospel of Jesus. expressed as the love of God, love of neighbor, and love of self. Justice is a social expression of love. The creation story in the book of Genesis reminds us that we are made in the image and likeness of God. We are shaped and molded and have breathed into us the divine spirit of God. And from this we have the understanding that all humans are created in the imago Dei, or likeness of God, and are equally and unconditionally loved by God. I recognize that one of our invited panelists was not able to be here today, my colleague, the President of the Methodist Church in Fiji. So as a Methodist, I'll add some comments that perhaps he might have shared. One of the key founders of the Methodist movement, the Anglican priest, the Reverend John Wesley, took this understanding of the imago Dei to be from the natural image in our humanness to the moral image of holiness and love intended for humanity by God, and the political image. Wesley's relational anthropology emphasized right relationships as central to human existence and recognized 4 core relationships for humans with God, expressed in knowing, loving, obeying, and experiencing God eternally. With other people, expressed in loving service, and with animals, expressed as loving protection. And also with ourselves, expressed as self-acceptance. Wesley also emphasized the characteristics of understanding will and liberty. Will being understood as the capacity to love God and neighbor, and the habit or practice of doing so, while liberty or freedom as the capacity to enact that will or not. This gracious freedom, therefore, is responsible. And so we find that that understanding of anthropology is holistic in the sense that Wesley considered all dimensions of human life beyond mere physical. This took him to explore the soul, the spiritual, and the mental aspects of humanity and their relationship to the physical body. For John Wesley, while the body and soul were distinct from each other, their connectedness was important and appropriate. In other words, both were integral to humanity as the imago Dei. And this Christian affirmation of sacredness of human personality was inseparable from addressing the realities, economic, political, social, and technical, which battered and suppressed that humanity, and which wreaked havoc on such physical, moral, and spiritual destruction among the poor. However, the challenge of reconciling faith and culture in some Pacific contexts has been a difficult journey. For the first 3 to 4 decades of autonomy as a self-governing church, the Methodist Church in Fiji struggled to articulate itself in a culturally contextual manner as part of its self-determination and affirmative action. Unfortunately for us in Fiji, this developed into a form of ethno-nationalism, which led to an othering rather than neighboring, as the concept of neighbor shifted from that of Christian understanding of the other, the stranger, the different, as in love your neighbor, the story of who is your neighbor, to that of kinship and indigeneity. The Third Pacific Island Mission Conference, held on Viwa Island in Fiji in 2010, acknowledged in its outcome statement the following: "We have identified that some elements of our conservative theologies do not give us the capacity to address the critical issues facing our communities. Rather, they adversely impact on our gender relations, our ability to dignify the other, our ability to analyze and address the factors creating the divisions of poor and wealthy in our communities, and our part in the destructive exploitation of the environment. Furthermore, we recognize that religious fundamentalism mixed with ethno-nationalism is at the root of much of the violence, gender, racial, and political, which affects our world. Since that time, 14 years now, there's been a concerted effort for more inclusive and human dignity affirming reflections on faith and culture that have had positive impacts in the church and society. Ecumenical relationships have improved. Issues of gender justice and child protection are being mainstreamed into the life and work of the Church. Last year, on the 36th anniversary of the first military coup d'etat in Fiji, and the 144th anniversary of the arrival of the first Indians brought to Fiji under the British modern slavery enterprise called the indenture system, the Methodist Church held a special reconciliation service to seek forgiveness from the Indo-Fijian community and launch a 10-year campaign of national reconciliation. This included the signing of the Forward Fiji Declaration by religious, political, and community leaders, vowing that there will be no more coups and divisions, and a commitment instead to promote mutual understanding and respect to build the new Fiji. This is a first step in an important journey in which human dignity will underpin the process of truth-telling and reconciliation. For the organization that I serve, the Pacific Conference of Churches, an Oceanian expression of human dignity and in a wider commitment to the whole inhabited earth, care for creation or environment, creation dignity was the concept of the Island of Hope, which was developed in a response to economic globalization earlier this century, and I believe Archbishop Chong will share more on this later. But I would just like to highlight a few of the contours of this Island of Hope. Caring and concern for others with the extended families, compassion for all people, especially for sick and elderly, are values of communities in the Pacific. Respect, hospitality, generosity, and forgiveness are other marks of our Oceanian traditional communities. The ethics of this Island of Hope are based on deep respect for the whole community of life. It fosters a culture of sharing and caring based on justice. Its values reflects God's prayer for creation and Christ's teaching to love one another and do justice to the poor. Nobody is excluded. The land, the sea, and people are integral parts of one entity. Subsistence farming, sustainable agriculture, and the sensitivity of the sacredness of the trees and the sea are part of their identity. The Island of Hope is in tune with nature and by sharing and caring to which all people want to journey to in order to celebrate life in all its fullness. The Island of Hope has the mana, or the power, to draw human beings together, and it is sustainable, wholesome, peaceful, and all-embracing. Over the last 2 decades, the Island of Hope concept has been embraced by Pacific churches into the concept of the Pacifica household of God, which must be inclusive of all the diversity of life in the Pacific, indigenous and non-indigenous, human and non-human. Of course, as we'll hear over the course of this conference, there are challenges with embracing each context in its diverse region. However, as a goal or work to ensure the whole of life approach, as articulated by the Reverend Professor Upoluvai, the principal of the Pacific Theological College, the Pacifica household of God represents a weaving or reweaving of faith, spirituality, traditional knowledge, wisdom, policy, and above all, praxis for the flourishing of Oceania, in which human dignity is a key part. And I'd like to conclude this reflection by sharing on human dignity as how love is manifested in the public space as justice. For the PCC, this is embodied in our work on self-determination and peace through the just and safe communities of women and men and child protection programs, in our social and political engagements on self-determination. And we recognize that the othering is a method used in colonization, neo-colonization, militarization, and in the legitimation of extractivism and exploitation. We have Pacifica or oceanic communities that continue to struggle for self-determination as an expression of their dignity in Mauhinui, Kanaki, Bougainville, and I must add here, in Hawaii. We have West Papua, where indigenous Melanesians consistently have their human dignity attacked, stripped, and denied as part of implicit, if not explicit, policy by Indonesia, which is a signatory to multiple covenants on human, social, cultural, and political rights. We have the issue of human dignity and inclusion for diverse communities. Currently, the third Pacific Human Rights Conference on Sexual Orientation, Gender, Identity, Expression, and Sexual Characteristics is underway in Nandi, with the theme, Pacific Islanders of Diverse Sexual Orientation, Gender, Identity and Expression, and Sex Characteristics, working for global justice and local human rights. There is the issue of discrimination and violence against the LGBTIQ+ community. Then there is the issue of human dignity for people with disabilities. We have the issue of human dignity in the context of labor mobility and climate change-induced displacement and relocation. We have the AUKUS military pact and other Indo-Pacific military strategies which use development aid, trade, and climate finance as instruments of diplomatic coercion for countries burdened with debt and the impacts of climate change, while major carbon-emitting countries refuse to curb fossil production and carbon emission. These are all issues of human dignity. So how do we gather here to reflect on human dignity, reflect on these aspects of human dignity, such as agency, self-determination? How do we weave an approach to human dignity that recognizes collective and individual dignity, the dignity of creation, and like the recent recognition of whales by traditional leaders of Aotearoa, Mauhinui, and the islands now called the Cook Islands? The affirmation of human dignity and of dignity of creation in both theology and action is essential for those who profess faith in Jesus, if we wish to see our region and the world experience the vision of Jesus in John 10:10, that we may have life and life in its fullest, life in abundance. Vinaka Wakalevu and mahalo.
Thank you very much, Archbishop Chong.
Bula Vinaka, and like to introduce again, show respect to the land, the oceans, and the vanua of Hawaii. My name is Peter Chong. My father is from mainland China and married to a local native woman in Fiji. So my maternal links take me to the province of Ndau Samu, and our rootedness in the Vanua is through totems, as many of the island people and parts of the world have. I was looking for if I could see a sandalwood tree around this place. We call it a yasi tree. I could not find one because that's our tree totem. And then our fish totem is the yawa, or the milkfish. And then our bird totem or animal is the ramba, which is a kind of a hawk. And that grounds us to the land, the ocean, and everything that lives on this planet Earth. As a faithful theologian, contextual theology, I'd like to begin with the context of theology in Oceania, and that's what Reverend Bhagwan has mentioned around the globalization. But let me just show you one small short video that grounds this passion that I have in regard to the environment and human dignity. This is a part of a song that I composed about climate change and in the context of globalization. It's just a verse and a chorus. The song is it'll take up a lot of my time if I play it all. I can't, all right. That's a song that I composed at 2 o'clock in the morning in Germany. Because of the time change, like I'm experiencing now, getting up at 2 o'clock. The other night I wanted to compose another song on globalization. Hey, my computer is freezing. Yeah, intentionally because we wanted to attract young people. And rap gives a kind of urgency and a little bit for me it's frustration. So just recently I was going down to my mother's province in a village near my mother's village. There's a big gravel extraction going on there, and it breaks my heart and builds up my blood pressure and everything when I go down and see a truck coming away from the village loaded with gravel. So on this occasion I was really angry. I intentionally, so our road in that part of the place is not 2 lanes, it's just one road. You have to give way to each other as you pass each other. I intentionally drove in the middle of the road just to show this gravel truck that, it's like David trying to fight against Goliath. And as the truck came close, I moved to the side, Otherwise, he'll have his way over me. But that, how do I get out of this?
It's a problem with the Mac people in Timekeepers, be gentle.
So, so I'd like to talk about human dignity in the context of globalization, and how that, beginning with the context that globalization is really a big threat to human dignity across the world. So in Fiji, we talk about 2 phases of globalization. I mean, the world becoming one unit. And that is, first, it's the colonial expansion. And for us in Fiji, it is the British expansion. And how the pattern is the same when you follow through how power is exercised during the colonial time, the British colonial time, and what we call the new colonialism, which is like gravel extraction and corporations that are out to exploit our natural resources. It's also being played out in climate change politics. And that's how, the trend is how in the beginning it was the British, for us it's British chiefs, and through that they get into they control people. So in the colonial expansion, it's about native rule. But in the neo-colonialism, and that is through globalization, it's the company, the government, and chiefs. These are the 3 important keys you want to open to get access to whether it's gravel, it's sand, and now it's deep sea mining, and how this is a big threat to human dignity. You see that this flowing into climate change politics, where it's the funders, the politicians, and the narratives that politicians make. How all these are interweaved into this, what is commonly known in the political language about the patron-client politics. The patron, a good patron for a rugby team is the patron that's got the money to buy the booze after the game. You don't want a patron that's got no money. You can shout the team with something to drink after the game. Yeah? So same thing here. A good patron has the money. I have the resources. I give you money. You support me or play to my game. So we see this played out in climate change trends. But behind this is the main drive for the globalization is the market and the profits, and how this benefit the rich and the powerful, and where human dignity is lost and don't matter. So this is the big threat. One of the big threats for us, and not only for us, it's all over the world, and how the global economic globalization and the big companies control what was once a sovereign identity, where, one time Tonga prided itself as being the kingdom. And one time it was only Tongans in Tonga. But today, that sovereign territory is no longer there. It's porous. There's a law. People like me there now in Tonga with Chinese heritage, So the thing has changed. So they say that the boundaries, the territories have become porous, so because of globalization, which I think you are familiar with what globalization is. Now, so globalization is, from this perspective, is a big problem to protecting human dignity. And it's a threat because it favors the rich, people who have the money, and the people who have the money patronize the local powers, and that is for us the chiefs. And this is what happens in the villages. Extractive industries come and they give money to the chief, give him some bottles of whiskey, and which they did during the colonial days. Give them some guns and something, and they think that's a lot of things. A lot when you have a gun. In tribal wars, when people are still using spears and clubs, but when you have a gun, oh, that's big. They think that was big. And the same thing is played out here. They think that money is big. And the chiefs take the money, and then they forget the very thing that they should uphold, and that is the vanua, the land, the totems. They've disrespected the totems. Very sad. There's a loss of spirituality and culture over here because of this problem, globalization. Now, it's not saying that globalization is altogether bad. And as Pope John Paul II said, it's neither bad nor no good, but it's how you use the thing. But in our case, there's a trail of injustice and poverty that is left behind. For the people of this island in this shore of Vatua, it's the biggest mangrove patch in Fiji, and black sand. So where there's mangrove, black sand, there's a lot of crabs. So for the women in Vatua, this is their big sustenance. Selling crabs, getting crabs, selling. A woman said in her story, she can get $300 a week. That's quite good wage for a person who lives in the village. But this gravel extraction, you talk about sustainable development that the government proposes and the Pacific Island proposes, this SDG is not respected when these companies come. And that's the price we pay when we when we get bought into these big companies. So what does what does the church's teaching say about this, about human dignity in the context where there's a big threat to human dignity, not only in Fiji but all over the world? So our Catholic social teaching is based on three very important foundations. One, it's got a theocentric foundation. James has already mentioned that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and because of that, everybody on this planet has the image and likeness of God, and God is the total presentation of a fully human person, and that is freedom, dignified, and respected. But unfortunately, that for us human beings, because we are not God, we are human beings, we are caught in the middle. But our dignity is based on God, first and foremost. So because of that, and that makes Christian perspective of dignity a little bit more different from the secular ones. I was just listening very attentively to the document that was read this morning, but there was no mention of God there. So from the Christian perspective, God is the foundation of our understanding of dignity. Because we are made in the image and likeness of God, we should see the face of God in everyone. The second foundation and that's how to recover the, challenge of globalization. The second foundation is that dignity is communitarian. So for us, from the islands and other community-centered countries in the world, cultures, community is what defines who we are. I am because of my clan. My honor, my good person, my value is based on how I work well with the community. And so it's fundamental that human dignity is located in the community. You cannot, the community contributes to the respect of human dignity. It's not an individual thing that you can do by yourself. And finally, we've added on to this dignity not only human beings, but the creation. There is a planetary dignity in every creation. And that's the first revelation, creation, before human beings were made, living creatures. And they too bear the mark of God. And they too, we should respect them. The climate crisis is happening today because we are not respecting planetary dignity and the species that we are killing and murdering at every moment. So what's the call to action? The call to action is to adopt a multilateral approach, interfaith, interregional, interdisciplinary, whatever. But we need to work on this together. Second, we must now talk about a globalization from below, that we cannot just be operating in conferences, in doctrine, but must go down below. And finally, I'd like to, we have to adopt what they call the Lilliput strategy. You're familiar with the story of Gulliver's Travel? There's a giant that landed up in a Lilliput island, and they were trying to tie down this giant. So one Lilliput cannot bring down this giant. It requires the whole island of Lilliputans to bring it down. We have a big giant in front of us, and that is economic globalization. And we need a Lilliput strategy, a strategy from below, and what Pope Francis calls, in the face of climate change, a multilateral approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Wakolo.
Organizers of the conference.
Is it on?
Okay, thank you. Yep. Organizers of the conference, brothers and sisters, participants, and distinguished members of the panel, what a joy it is to be with you today. I am Fijian, but I'm based in New Zealand with two of my other brothers who oversee the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints operation in the Pacific. Now, Oceania is nothing if not vast and rich. It's vast in terms of geographical area. It spans the mighty Pacific Ocean, which includes more than 15,000 islands, and arguably comprises about 9% of the Earth's land surface. It is rich in terms of culture and tradition. It is estimated that Oceania is home to about 1,800 distinct cultures and languages. The art in this region of the world is known for showcasing patterns that reflect the natural world and symbols inspired by closely held beliefs. Various factors such as history, geography, religion, societal evolution, and indigenous practices influence many, if not all, aspects of life in this part of the world. This is to say nothing of the additional cultural influences that are present as artifacts of colonization and or by way of modern-day globalization and mass social communication. Now, having established all that, I am aware that the purpose of this conference is to add to our collective body of knowledge with regard to how human dignity is understood from oceanic cultural and societal perspectives. Pursuant to that goal, I would now like to give you some indication of how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints perceives human dignity. Furthermore, as part of my participation in this conference, I hope to share with you not only how our faith tradition views the concept of human dignity cognitively, but how we strive to embrace it as a matter of application. May I emphasize two important points in one sentence. True doctrine understood changes attitude and behavior. And to be effective in making sure that it sticks, it is always home-centered, church-supported. So how do you spell human dignity? It is L-O-V-E. That's a spelling of human dignity. What does it look like? It's unity and in diversity, as we heard this morning. This is true to our 600,000 members of the church throughout the Pacific, or 1,900 congregations. Now, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, part of our core doctrine is a fundamental belief that all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God, reinforcing what my two members of panelists have shared, as alluded to earlier. Each is a beloved spirit son or daughter of heavenly parents, and as such, each has a divine nature and destiny. Gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. We believe this is true for every individual, without respect to ethnicity, color, religion, socioeconomic status, language, region, country, culture, or island. In the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, which is a companion to the Bible, quote, "He invited them all to come unto him and partake of his goodness, and he denieth none that come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female, all are alike unto God." In the New Testament, we read, "He is the Father of our spirit, we are his children." When a primary child is raised in a Latter-day Saint home, she or he learns this fundamental doctrine through singing hymns, even in their mother tongue. "I am a child of God, and he has sent me here, has given me an earthly home with parents kind and dear." That was beautifully sung by Dr. Erica Glenn and the choir at dinner last night. As the child grows up, at 12 years old, she or he is encouraged with the others to memorize and recite their young women or young men theme. The theme for young women reads in part, I am a beloved daughter of heavenly parents with a divine nature and eternal destiny. In an Instagram post by our beloved prophet, President Russell M. Nelson, on July 20, 2022, he wrote, I believe that if the Lord was speaking to you directly, the first thing he would make sure you understand is your true identity. My dear friends, you are literally his children. Make no mistake about it. Your potential is divine. With your diligent seeking, God will give you glimpses of who you may become. Close quote. Again, true doctrine understood changes attitude and behavior, and it's always home-centered, truth-supported. In the scriptures, we read that Jesus taught there are two great commandments. From the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Close quote. As followers of Jesus Christ, we have a deep desire to show our love for God, and because of that, our hearts are naturally drawn toward doing what we can to ensure the well-being of others. As part of his ministry, Christ served as our exemplar in demonstrating love for his neighbors as he healed the sick, fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and cared for those in need. Referring to history. Now, history, it's either draw us away from each other or draw us close to each other or unites us. This is what happened in Samoa. In 1904, Joseph F. Smith, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, directed the purchase of land up in the green hills of the island, Upolu in Samoa. The first settlers on this land were Samoan Latter-day Saints who had been persecuted for their religious beliefs and exiled from their villages. The newly purchased land provided a place of safety, a refuge where they could live with dignity, embracing their faith and Christian beliefs. The people held a meeting to give thanks and praise to the Lord for his mercy and love. The people chose to name the land Saniatu, which means prepare to go forth. Starting over wasn't easy, and being exiled was painful. But the early villagers went forward in faith, planting crops, building homes and places of worship. They also established a school for their children. Today, Latter-day Saints reside peacefully in the villages of their ancestry, worshiping in 165 congregations across Samoa. Members of the church are welcomed as participants in the Samoa National Council of Churches. There is a holy temple in Apia, and President Russell M. Nelson has announced that a temple will be built in Savai. In the Saniatu village, the church supports a primary or elementary school. The students sing with zeal words penned by Seli Multalo. I love the village of Saniatu, the waving palms and lawns so green. I love the mountains and the valley, the sky as blue as I've ever seen. Oh, Saniatu, awake and rise now. Are we able to play that video? Thank you. This is a beautiful singing of students who are attending that elementary school. I think there's power in what they have learned and how they have united. Again, members of the church and those who are not members of the church at Saniatu in Samoa.
Sister
same sign that you saw when you entered BYU Hawaii. Enter to learn is how we say hi. Go forth to serve when we say goodbye. No matter where on earth you may roam, remember Saniatu will always be your home. A number of years ago, President Ezra Taft Benson taught us that everything that concerns the economic, social, and spiritual welfare of the human family is and ever will be the concern of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, close quote. Since its establishment, one foundational element of our faith has been to help meet both the temporal and spiritual needs of our brothers and sisters. For us, this goes beyond a passive acknowledgement that all God's children should be treated with dignity and respect. It involves dedicating resources, including time, talents, efforts, ideas, and yes, funding, to ensuring conditions are favorable to allow all humans to feel the measure of their creation. Education. Given the location of this conference, you are likely familiar with the Church's long history of emphasizing education throughout the world, including Oceania. As part of the Church's Self-Reliance Development Program, we are taught that education is an important part of our Heavenly Father's plan to help us become more like Him. Obtaining an education provides understanding and skills that can help us develop self-reliance, provide for our future families, and be of great service to the Church and to the world. Though the Church's efforts with respect to tertiary education often get the most press, the Church supports learning at a number of different levels and across a variety of institutions. For instance, the Pacific schools of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are scattered across 9 islands in 4 countries, in Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, and Kiribati. They service age groups ranging from kindergarten to year 13. The 15 schools have a total enrollment of approximately 6,000 students and employ over 400 staff and faculty. In Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, and expanding to Solomon Islands, we have moms preschools and succeeding schools for young adults who did not go to school or leave school much earlier in life. Another way the Church provides educational support in the Pacific is through BYU Pathway Connect. BYU Pathway is an online program where students gather once a week, either virtually or at a local church facility. Students can apply the course credits to a university degree in BYU Hawaii or BYU Idaho or Ensign College. The Church sponsors Kolega, Human Rights Education for Children. The program is being implemented in Fiji and will pilot in Tonga and Samoa later this year. Along with offering seminary classes for high school students, the Church also sponsors religious classes known as Institute for Young Single Adults ages 18 to 30 and married university students. In addition to education, the Church also endeavors to meet a variety of humanitarian needs. May I share with you some of the humanitarian effort we are doing we did in 2023. With a desire to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ and living the 2 great commandments, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints engaged in 4,119 humanitarian projects in 191 countries and territories, with 6.2 million hours of volunteer work and $1.36 billion in expenditures. This project included clean water and sanitation, emergency relief, healthcare and mobility, feeding the hungry, housing assistance, mental health. In one particular instance, persistent drought and rising sea levels led to a water crisis in the island nation of Kiribati in 2023. The salt content of the water sources on the outer islands made them increasingly unsafe to drink. In response, the Church began working with CDEs who are specific to design and install water desalination units in 5 outer island communities that will provide 5,000 residents with safe drinking water for years to come. Now, therefore, what? Everyone needs to experience the pure love of Jesus Christ, reflected in our words and actions, repeatedly, iteratively, and intentionally. The Savior's job is to heal. Our job is to love in such a way that others are drawn to Jesus Christ. We do need all our compassion, empathy, and love as we interact with those around us, especially the Good Samaritan kind of love. Love when love is expected, and more so, love when love is not expected. That is human dignity in action. Brothers and sisters, in closing, I love the Maori proverb, which I believe was penned with L-O-E-V-E and unity in diversity. He aha te mea nui o te ao. What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is people, it is people, it is people. We are all sons and daughters of God. Understanding this doctrine will change our attitude and behavior towards humanity, bar none. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Father Francis.
Oh, yes.
Let's see. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Excuse my informality, not just in the apparel, but in what I'm about to say. I say excuse my informality because the speech that I wrote, or the paper that I wrote for this thing, I didn't rip up, but discarded, because it was on the wrong subject. Well, it was human dignity, but it was the wrong aspect of human dignity. You see, I have to agree with everything that I've heard. There's not one thing I heard that I took exception to. And so I can just say amen to everything that's been said. But being a Jesuit, I'd like to go on a little bit and say something else. I'd like to do, it's my own kind of summary, if you want, of this. I'd like to say that, to remind you of one thing that's been expressed again and again. Words come easily. Now, I'm not talking about speakers, to us speakers. I'm talking about it's easy to get on a high and pen a document that expresses the importance of human dignity. But it takes a lifetime, it takes generations of people to understand what that means and to apply it to life in a particular place. All men are created equal. That was written some time ago, like 2 centuries ago. And we didn't say live up to that ideal right away. I do remember that it was a while before women got the vote and before this whole black rights movement started, and we're still battling this thing now. So it's not instantaneous. The documents are easy. What we're talking about here is a process of people coming to an understanding of universality. I say universality because that's come up again and again. It's easy to become a Swiftie. Taylor Swift is your hero, or maybe for some people. It's easy to take Kanye West or some kind of a football player, or for me, a basketball player, as a person who's something of an icon. It's easy for people to take a traditional chief or a legendary figure in their own society and say, yes, here is a person that we reverence. We all have our rock stars and our movie legends and Hall of Famers and things like that, our island heroes. But that's not what human dignity is. It's been said again and again here, and I have to say it one more time, that it's universal. And unless it becomes universal, it becomes rather useless, except for kin, except for people in the neighborhood, except for people in the community that you happen to be around, or people who speak your own language, or people who are, have the same complexion that you do. We're talking about a universality, how people get that universality and develop it. Now, my whole paper was what the instances were, what the evidence was that I could find of universality, developing universality among the Micronesian peoples. And I would have to say that what I did was voiced already very closely to what Pastor Bhagwan said in, I think it was you, who said about this in Island Society. So it's there is the importance of universality here and the process that it takes to develop that. Without it, human dignity is just groundless, it seems. I also think that it's been mentioned again and again that God has created us as human beings, not with how do we want to call this? Not with we're all brothers and sisters. Let's put it that way. Created brothers and sisters, not just created by God, but created as family. A family that's to be restored as family at some point or other. That's become a rock bed of my belief, and I think the belief of most people who have endorsed, in a real sense, ecumenism. Not as just a kind movement, but as sort of as I say, a rock bed or foundational point in their own belief system. Human beings derive their value not just because God is not just an add-on, but a basic component in somehow or other, or the search for God is a basic component in each human being. So religion is not, we don't have the supernatural sort of placed on top of this natural life thing. Sometimes that was the impression that I got when I was growing up, but it's a constituent part of who we are as human beings. I say all of that as sort of background to this thing. I'm not going to go on forever. I'm going to stop before my 15 minutes is up. But what I want to do is share with you a story, or the story of our church growth and my growth, and a little bit of the entry point into Micronesia. See, we have a saying in the Catholic Church, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. That means outside of the church, there's no salvation. That's a tough saying, eh? It's a tough saying, and it's nobody will admit it now, but it's gone off the books. It's gone off the books because hardly anybody believes it anymore. Hardly anybody believes it. We look around and we see the people who are working to assist others, and we're taken by the work that they do. And so what we can do is say that everybody, the justification the problem was that this extra ecclesiam nulla salus was the justification for the employment of means of conversion, even forced conversion, in our own church once upon a time. That was part of our history, just like there's a part of the U.S. history that doesn't live up to human dignity. The same is probably true of many of our churches, particularly in Europe during the Reformation time and post-Reformation years. But I think now we see that, that the goals were not to baptize, the goal shouldn't have been to have baptized as many people as possible and protect the church as a vehicle of salvation, but to reach hearts. I mean, that's obvious right now. I mean, nobody probably has any disagreement with that. But that depended on our own realization, our recognition that God touches the hearts of all people, converted or not. I haven't spoken to anybody that, whether a professed member of a religious organization or not, that I consider totally secular. They may be blind, or they may be pushing down certain elements of that in their life, but I think that they all have a capacity and a desire, whether the desire is recognized or not, for that. without getting into the theology of it, Karl Rahner, who we studied a long time ago in the 60s when I was doing theology, talks about anonymous Christians. He has an attempt to reconcile the old dogma with modern understanding of how God speaks to us all. So human dignity is grounded in the belief that humans are created with a desire and the need to find the divine. And so respect for other faith traditions has become a lot easier in our day. When I came to Micronesia, other Jesuits would point, this guy is a Methodist, or this guy is a Congregationalist, or this guy is Latter-day Saints. I don't think we had him yet at that time, but whatever. That was that generation. Something happened in the 1960s, and we became Reformed. I don't know what it was, but people all over the Pacific talk about this. The age of ecumenism began. Was it the Cultural Revolution that was going on throughout the world, not just in the US, not just at Woodstock and places like that? I don't know. But something was happening. We were becoming bigger people and more open to one another. And I can say that when I came to Micronesia, I had friends who were Lutheran pastors, they were other people, and so it wasn't hard to become ecumenical. It wasn't hard to become universal either. It wasn't hard to become universal because when I was a kid growing up, I was reading these Life magazine series, The Family of Man, and pictures of what a wedding was like in Tanzania, or what a funeral custom was like in different parts of Oceania. I looked at this stuff and was fascinated by it, and I said, yeah, these people are like us. And I think that was a secret. These people are like us. I've often thought, I came from Buffalo, which is an outlying place, not Midwest exactly, but close to it, at least in the minds of New Yorkers. And I came there and was sometimes kidded about the accent that I had, or accent. When I volunteered for Micronesia, I volunteered not because I thought I was saving souls, but volunteered because I thought those people on the other side of the world ought to have a chance as well. And my life was changed. It was changed because I thought I went as a teacher helping people. And what's happened is I've become a lifelong learner. I've received much more than I've given. But one of the things that I've received in the course of all this is the understanding that these guys and myself were the same, basically. And now it doesn't take much of a stretch at all to do that with anybody in any part of the world. Now, I'm not offering myself up as an example, but I'm just saying that this is a kind of a journey that we have to make. Peace Corps volunteers, I don't know, Latter-day Saints missionaries, Jesuit volunteers to places, I don't care what it is. Send people abroad, give them the opportunity, as you're doing here, to find, to understand, to grow with people from different cultures. Because in doing that, you're probably doing the best thing that we can to promote what we call human dignity. And human dignity starts here. That's it.
Thank you all very much. I want to start off with a question for the Archbishop. Last year we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the UDHR, and next year, as you know, is the 60th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council's declaration, Dignitatis Humanae, which focuses on human dignity as the central force for religious freedom. And I just wanted to read actually one part of that declaration, which says, the declaration of this Vatican Council on the right of man to religious freedom has its foundation in the dignity of the person whose exigencies have come to be are fully known to human reason through centuries of experience. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit, Archbishop, to this relationship between human dignity, which is the focus of this conference, and religious freedom, and how that plays out with respect to the three principles that you articulated, the relationship of the image of God, the communitarianism, and creation dignity. And do it briefly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, if every human being is made in the image and likeness of God, then we must see all religions, and even the native religions, like the pre-Christian religions, including Hinduism, Islam, as part of their responding to being created in the image and likeness of God. And so it's, and that, and Father Francis alluded to that, with, which is very thick in Kalrana, about that every human being is by nature oriented to God. There's a cry in each soul that can only be satisfied by God. So that includes believers and non-believers. My father, you can label him as a non-believer. But one day he met with the mystery of life, and he, for the first time in his life, he asked, can the priest do something about this? He slept that night, and he said somebody was trying to choke him. He did not say the devil, because he probably did not believe in the devil himself. But something, he was faced with the mystery of life. So each human being, as Kalrana said, is by nature oriented to God. So, and this is, and when we begin theology from an anthropological starting point, that every human being is incomplete, finite. That's why we are struggling with the human dignity. We don't have it. And because of that, every human being, in the Bible it says God planted his image and likeness there. But also by nature, every human being has this openness for completeness, which can only be found in the other, not in human beings. And that's why the human dignity cannot be found only in our own search as amongst human beings, because we don't have it. We are oriented to the one who has the fullness of dignity, and that is God. So it's on this basis that that is a good foundation for religious respect, freedom, and respecting of religions. You know, in Fiji, and James will know this, we acknowledge that we are a very multi-religious place, but unfortunately, a lot of Christians still regard Hindus, Muslims as pagans, as not in the image and likeness of God, and that's a problem. And so I was just talking to a conference that we had about in Fiji about faith leaders coming, and I made this emphasis so that Christians in the room, you know, awaken to this God, that God is much bigger than Christianity, you know. God is present in other religions. It's hard, sometimes hard for some Christians to accept it, but God has to be big. Otherwise, if God is only in Christians, oh, this is a very small God that we've made ourselves. We have created ourselves. And this is not the God who created us into his image, but unfortunately, we have created this image of God ourselves and made God small. And so this is the foundation for the religious freedom. It's based on the, you know, the human dignity that is based on God.
Thank you. That was beautiful. There's another part of Dignitatis Humanae that talks about this issue of communitarianism, and I loved the theme that went through all of your comments about human dignity being tied to communitarianism. And the declaration says, religious freedom therefore ought to have this further purpose and aim, namely that men may act with greater responsibility in fulfilling their duties in community life. And Reverend Bhagwan, you spoke about the rootedness of human dignity in the communitarian versus the individualistic approach, which is more prevalent in Western cultures. We saw this as well in our conference on African conceptions of human dignity. And I just was hoping that maybe you could expand more. I'll open this up to the whole panel. You could expand more on this focus of the communitarian aspects of human dignity.
That means I take the first shot and you three have some time to think. Well, this is the context that we don't live in silos. We don't live as individuals. We live in community. We exist in community. From the very first point when in the book of Genesis, God says, let us create humankind. And so we recognize that from the very beginning, there is a relationship. So as human beings, we live in relationship with one another, and as we've heard today, and as we continue to say, with God. And our relationship with others is based on our relationship with God. We express that love with this love. For the Pacific, this is very important because our identity, our sense of identity, does not come from what we do or what we own. It's based on who are our parents, where we come from. As Archbishop alluded to earlier, what is your sacred totem? What is your sacred fish, your sacred animal, your sacred plant? All of these things talk about relationship and community. And so, in the context of human dignity, human rights, it is not about the individual right, but the collective responsibility to care for others. So I'll just leave it there because I know there's others to share, but recognizing that there is a responsibility that comes with living in community to care for all in the community. Naka.
About community?
Yeah, I'd like to say this, that one of the things that I have back home is a folder with notes that on a paper that I would like to write someday, maybe or maybe not. But it's on individualism, and it's the excesses of individualism in our own time. It's asking, how is it that from maybe the 1960s, why is that always a starting point? I don't know. Maybe it's my own memory limitations. But from the 1960s on, we seem to have taken individuals and increased their autonomy. There are some people who believe, they've gone back to the early philosophers, and they believe that individuals, people were created to be selfish, essentially, rather than to be united into a group. And so it's become an ideology, the ideology of the individual. And there's any number of ways that this shows itself. Our campaign, I think, my campaign is to prove, no, that's not the way it should be. And somehow or other work to reverse this trend. Because as these speakers were saying, everything relies on our being brothers and sisters to one another. If we can't do that, then we can't solve any of these problems in our world today.
Thank you.
It's amazing to see how we do things in Oceania. For those who were raised in rural villages, it's amazing to see that it's almost every day or every Sunday you will see someone carrying a plate of food to the neighbors. It's something that you see constantly. It's a wonderful thing to see in villages in Oceania where you have many chapels and churches in one village. That is a communal living that we see in Oceania, but it's something that draws people together to be united in their community. I think that's great strength and unity when we observe and when we see that. It's when you move to urban areas, you started to move away a little bit from that. But I'm always reminded about the image of being raised in a village in Fiji, on how they lived in their communal way of life. But I think it's a great strength in itself.
Thank you. We'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. Yes, right here. Could you just walk to the microphone that's right there? That'd be great. Thank you.
My question is, my name is Nemani Delibitik. I'm from, originally from Fiji, but I now live in New Zealand. But my question is directed at the panel. As soon as we arrived here, we went into a gathering, and we met this interesting man, and he believes in Jesus Christ, but his perception about life differs to what we believe in, or most of us here believe in. He spent 20 years in mainland America. Then he came back here and lived on his family land. He's a Hawaiian. And he invited us to go and visit him. So we went. We went to his farm. And it's quite amazing how he exists. And I was looking around. You see ripe bananas, pawpaws everywhere. Even coconut trees on his farm. And then I looked around. I said, "Where's your house?" And then he pointed to a tent. He lives in a tent. There is no electricity. I couldn't see any tap water there. I looked at him and I said, "Is this?" He said, "Yeah, this is it." So how do you get light? And he said, he brought a torch. He said, "This is my light." But do you watch news, the television? He said, "Yes, I use my phone." So it's an interesting concept about life, how it's changed from one lifestyle to another. But he's happy. He's happy the way he exists now. He even embraced two brothers who came here looking for accommodation. He accommodated them on the piece of land, right? He said, "Don't pay anything, just live here." So I just want to ask the panel, because he was talking about, education. Do you need education if you're happy? But that sort of goes against the grain of what we talk about, that we need to teach people to be educated and all that. From the perspective of our religious leaders who are sitting here, how do you see this case about perceptions about life? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Well, I can give it a go. I was there when we were having a chat with this very interesting man. And he was quite ignorant about education. But the point that we see, there's one thing about human beings: we are social beings. We are made for relationship, and that's why in the mythical story of creation with Adam and Eve, the man is incomplete by himself. He needs a partner. because it's the nature of a human being. It's also the nature of God to be in relation. And we see this in Christianity. Many denominations believe in a God who is Father, Son, Holy Spirit. The Hindus also, in the feast, the expression of the Hindu symbol of the Om also has something that is similar to the Trinity. So relational is part of the life of God. We are made in the image and likeness of God. We are relational. It's part of our nature. If you take human beings out of that relationship, if you are not open to education, because education, you can't educate yourself, you know. You are finite. You don't have it all. You need other human beings. If you take education out of your life, that means to be educated. You are like, in ocean imagery, you are like fish out of the water, man. We know what fish is out of water is. It means in the pot, in the next thing. so that would be my thing about. There's something that's fundamental to human beings, that is the socialness of our being and the communitarian, where we can meet our basic needs, physical, emotional, and spiritual, but in relationship.
Just listening to the story, we can see that this experience is one of context. Also coming from the mainland United States, all of that lifestyle and looking for a change in that lifestyle, looking for a more simplicity in life. I always tell my wife, so I'm a Methodist pastor, my wife is Catholic, my children are Anglican. We are an ecumenical family, so we're trying to practice what Father Francis was talking about. But it's interesting, because she was raised in a very simple lifestyle. When we talk about going camping, she said that going camping is what we call just the weekend for us. So it's very different experiences. And I think that's something also to take into consideration. It looks like what this person is seeking, reconnection with land after being disconnected from it. And that's something that we face when people move into urban spaces. And perhaps COVID helped us rethink some of this relationship with land, with others. But also in the context of education, the question for us in the Pacific is nowadays, what is the right type of education for us? Is it education that makes us just into labor units? Or is it education that connects us in a holistic type of education? And we've been doing this experiment over the last few years called Reweaving the Ecological Mat, which talks about unweaving the mat of development and reweaving it, taking out the damaged or toxic strands and bringing in strands that recognize indigenous knowledge and wisdom, recognize values, and perhaps that is what we're looking at in the context of human dignity. As I mentioned earlier, self-determination, the right of communities, of individuals to reconnect with who they are. I think that's a very important part of this journey. Thank you.
I love the thought that even though he may not have resources like many other people do, but I love the thought that with the resources that he has in terms of the land, he's able to offer that to others. In other words, he's not only looking inward, he's also looking outward. And it's also interesting when he defined what happiness is for him. But for most of us, we will need to honor individual agency, the choices of individual. While yes, we all have individual choices, the consequences of the choices is something that we do not choose. But for him, that's happiness. For members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, happiness is going to church on Sunday, or have a strong, united family, or going to the temple. But even when you look at the temple, with Moses using it as the tabernacle, but for those who had the privilege of visiting the temple yesterday, that's where we're at today. But it's again, many would say that I'm having a spiritual experiences on earth. And others would say, well, I'm a spiritual son, daughter of God. I'm having physical experiences in preparation to my return. But I think it's a matter of respecting choices of individuals. But again, the question is, how do we inspire him or her to love education, to reconnect with God? That's probably a question that all we need to contribute to, and it's all part of human dignity.
Thank you very much. Would you please join me in thanking our panelists this morning?